continuing to see troubling activity out of China, and that's putting it very mildly. What we have seen going on in Hong Kong now with arrests that will just make you pull your hair out of your head, with now sanctions upon American politicians and business leaders for, what was it here? Performing badly, and so much more, including now one of the senior intelligence officials of the United States saying, hey, we've got a concern about China interfering in America's election, hoping that Joe Biden might become president of the United States. What are we to make of it all? For answers and discussion, I am very pleased to welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads, Gordon G. Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China. Also, most recently, he's now the author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and Losing South Korea. He's been published in numerous publications, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the National Interest, and many others, and is a Gatestone Institute Fellow, and he joins us now here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Gordon, welcome back, my friend. It's good to have you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jimmy.
Thanks for coming on. I mean, look, how would you describe the situation with China right now? Because I definitely think troubling is probably an understatement at this point, given everything that's going on.
Yeah, it's extremely dangerous what Beijing is doing because it's moving across the board against a range of countries and people, of course. So you have, for instance, in June, in a premeditated act, it killed 20 Indian soldiers. You have the end of autonomy in Hong Kong, and that is with the jailings that we have just witnessed, the arrest of Jimmy Lai, his two sons, and 4 executives of Apple Daily, the pro-democracy newspaper, and the troubling intercepts of the U.S. Navy in the global commons, a threat to dismember Japan, which Beijing made on August 2. So it's just going after everyone. And you got to wonder, why is China taking on the world? I mean, is this an act of strength? Is it an act of weakness? Whatever it is disrupting peace in not only just the region, but everywhere.
And so when it comes to Hong Kong, let's zero in there, because there had been this idea of one country, two systems that was supposed to last until, what, 2050 or so in terms of the relationship between Hong Kong and China, where Hong Kong would essentially be able to continue its autonomous or semi-largely autonomous state. China just decided in the past few months to scrap that, and now they've been arresting dissidents, they're arresting media figures, and many others. So in terms of Hong Kong specifically, what are we noticing is exactly happening, particularly in terms of the change in the way China is treating Hong Kong, that Americans must know about, Gordon?
Ended Hong Kong, which was promised until 2047 under the one country, two systems formula. This was a promise documented in a treaty with Britain, the Sino-British Joint Declaration of 1984. And on June 30, China enacted its national security law, which is draconian in the extreme. As people have said, this is the end of law in Hong Kong. And they've used it now to arrest a number of protesters, dissidents, and most famously, Jimmy Lai, the publisher of Apple Daily. They try to decapitate the paper. They basically, their position is, unless you are completely in love with China and completely submit yourself to it, you're probably violating the national security law just by breathing. And that really is, as people say, the end of any sort of autonomy in Hong Kong. This has important implications for the United States and for other countries, because Hong Kong is a global financial center, but probably won't retain that status because China is using coercion in a way that really makes it very difficult for international financial institutions to operate freely.
Yeah, so when we're talking about Hong Kong, one of the things that we have noticed is that people there are not just taking this sitting down or lying down. They have been out there protesting, making their voices heard, getting arrested, as we're talking about, particularly because I think that they have dealt with this perspective, come from this perspective of freedom, that they've been able to live their lives as they see fit. Hong Kong has been a financial capital of the world. In fact, a great many studies have identified Hong Kong as a leading free market area on the globe. And now that's being taken away. And they're like, we see what's happened in other parts of China when they have done this. We don't want it to happen here. Is that right?
Yes. Well, this is important because Taiwan one country, two systems, which is supposed to apply in Hong Kong, was originally developed by Beijing for Taiwan. And Taiwan has always been the big prize for Beijing. Now, last year, Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan, she wasn't going to be even renominated by her own party for the election which occurred in January. She was so far behind. But when Beijing started to try to put the screws into Hong Kong with this extradition bill that it proposed, all of a sudden people in Taiwan remembered why they enjoyed their freedom, why everything was so important to them. And Tsai Ing-wen, she got the nomination of the Democratic Progressive Party to run for re-election, and she won in a landslide, which shows you that Beijing's policies are ham-fisted, but nonetheless, what's happening in Hong Kong is a lesson for the rest of the world. This is what Beijing will do. It will not honor its promises, and that means whether we're talking about trade or whether we're talking about climate change or whatever, Beijing does not honor its words.
Gordon G. Chang, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. And I do want to make one correction. It's the Gatestone Institute that you're a fellow at. I think I was combining that with a Star Trek Institute, the Daystrom Institute, and combining a brand new institute that Gordon Chang is involved with. But that is not the case. So Gordon,
Jimmy,
yes, sir.
Jimmy, I would love to be at Starfleet Academy, so thank you very much.
Well, I was thinking of the Daystrom Institute, but I do think a lot of people working there happen to have gone through the Starfleet Academy first. So I certainly appreciate that, Gordon G. Chang. By the way, I don't know if we have had you on the show before. Maybe we did in the early on where we had the show opening with the harmonica playing and all that fun with Biff Gore and the theme song. What do you think about that?
I saw that because we were on, and I didn't hear it because the video, the sound wasn't working. But it really
Nathan
is very, very attractive. So one day I'm going to have to see the with the sound.
I'm going to have to send you and your wonderful wife a link to that music video. I'd love your thoughts on that. But back to China and the serious issues at hand, Gordon G. Chang. When we're talking about Hong Kong, that's one key aspect of what we're seeing right now. We've seen the photos, we've seen the videos, we've seen the travesties that are going on there. But you mentioned Taiwan as being really the big prize. And a lot of people are growing increasingly concerned about Taiwan. In fact, I've seen reports that the U.S. military is considering options in case China, mainland China, were to attack Taiwan, which the United States hasn't actually recognized Taiwan as an independent country up to this point, right? But how does that dynamic work, and what should Americans know about the situation vis-a-vis China and Taiwan?
Well, the People's Republic of China has never ruled Taiwan.
Right.
In Beijing, they talk about reunification. People in Taiwan talk about unification because they look at this and they say, look, we've never been part of you. But Beijing believes that Taiwan is China's 34th province. People in Taiwan believe that they're a sovereign state. They're a free democratic society. And of course, the People's Republic of China is not. Taiwan is critically important to the United States for two reasons. First of all, for more than a century, we have drawn our Western defense perimeter off the coast of East Asia. And Taiwan is at the center of that perimeter, that crucial line. Is that sitting at the intersection of the South China and East China Seas. It prevents the Chinese Navy and Air Force from flooding into the Western Pacific and eventually into the Eastern Pacific. So to us, from a strategic point of view, it's just so important. Also, there's something even more significant, and that is Beijing has been attacking our democracy and even the concept of democracy, and it does so every day. We cannot allow China to absorb any free society, especially one as important as Taiwan. So I believe that we need to say in public as well as in private to Chinese leaders that we will defend Taiwan.
Let's talk about another aspect of all that we're seeing with China. They've sanctioned 11 different Americans, including Senators Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Pat Toomey. They've performed badly, according to the Foreign Ministry spokesperson for China. How did this come about in terms of the Chinese saying, hey, we're going to sanction these U.S. officials and also some business executives? And does that really do more than sort of just send a message of disdain? Or is there some teeth for some of these individuals who may have investments in China? I don't know.
Yeah. Last week, President Trump, pursuant to the new Hong Kong legislation, sanctioned 11 individuals for eroding Hong Kong's autonomy. And that included Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, the top political officer. So China this week decided retaliatory sanctions. What's significant is not only did they go after the senators and Chris Smith, the New Jersey Republican, who's a human rights advocate, they also sanctioned NGO leaders in the US. But what was significant, what was really important was they didn't sanction any Trump administration officials, which showed either caution on the part of the Beijing regime or the realization that they had really no cards to play. Um, our sanctions on China, on those 11 individuals, are really meaningful. It's not like they're going to go to the United States, but we are also sanctioning banks that have any financial dealings with those individuals. And that is where the bite is in our sanctions. China's sanctions have no bite at all. And matter of fact, the six legislators, they wear that with pride. You know, they're boasting about being sanctioned by China. So they did them a favor. So China right now is in a curious position of not really doing anything in terms that's effective.
Let's talk a little bit about the dynamics between the United States and China with your Gordon Chang, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. When we look at his relationship with President Xi, yesterday morning, I believe it was, there was an interview that Hugh Hewitt did, radio talk show host, with President Trump. And in cut 7, he's asked specifically about his changed relationship with Xi Jinping. I want to take a listen to this and get your reaction.
But you tweet nice things about President Xi. Is it possible to both be nice to people and also be tough as hell on them?
I had a very good relationship with President Xi. I would even say better than good. I would say we had a great relationship. He's a great gentleman, but my relationship is no longer very good with him because of what they did with the China virus. If you ask me that now, I would have said great. I had a great relationship with them. I made a great trade deal. They're buying billions and billions of dollars worth of product. You notice you don't hear the farmers complaining, do you? They just gave the largest corn order in history last week, the largest ever. You know why? Because he's smart. Because rather than saying we're not going to do business with them, they say let's get the biggest orders we've ever gave because they know how I feel.
So in terms of the relationship between President Trump and Xi Jinping, which started off seemingly pretty good, then he got into the trade war off and on. They were reaching little agreements here and there. Then they finally reached the phase 1 agreement at the end of last year. And then coronavirus hits, and that's President Trump's statement or reasoning for why he says we no longer have a very good relationship. Do you think it's deteriorated much? How do you think they interact with one another now, especially given coronavirus, but also all the other things that we're seeing going on right now?
Well, Jimmy, it's certainly deteriorated. In 2017, first year of the Trump administration, President Trump did what every other American president has tried to do since Nixon, and that is to try to have a good relationship, a friendly relationship with Beijing, and to see if the Chinese will reciprocate. Well, Xi Jinping didn't reciprocate. And so that's why we had the friction in 2018 and why it's really degenerated into what we see today. But I think that's a good thing because we're being realistic about China. And President Trump, for the first time since the Eisenhower administration, is taking robust measures to protect the United States from malicious Chinese actions. So I view this as progress. Not everyone is going to view it in the same way, but we got to remember that China's challenge to the U.S. is existential, that they are engaging in all sorts of activities that they shouldn't be. We closed the Houston consulate as a signal, but Beijing appears to continue what is completely unacceptable to the United States.
Now, Gordon Chang, when we look at the dynamics between President Trump and President Xi, one of the things we cannot ignore is the election that's coming up on November 3rd. We're just a few months away from Election Day. Voting starts in a matter of weeks. And Ambassador Robert O'Brien, who is the national security advisor, has indicated that he believes and that intelligence is showing that China wants Joe Biden to be elected president of the United States. On the Hugh Hewitt show yesterday, President Trump was specifically asked about that here in Cut 8. Let's take a quick listen and get some reaction from you.
Ambassador O'Brien said China wants Vice President Biden to win. Why do you think that is?
Because they'll own the United States if he wins. And with me, they were having the worst year in 67 years because I tariffed the hell out of them. We took in billions and billions of dollars. I gave some of it to the farmers because they were targeted, and I put the rest in the Treasury of the United States. We've taken in tens of billions of dollars from China, and it was having a huge impact on China, negative impact on China.
You're still the best.
China will own, just like when his son walked out with $1.5 billion from China to manage, where he'll make millions of dollars a year. Look, China will own the United States if this election is lost by Donald Trump. If I don't win the election, China will own the United States. You're going to have to learn to speak Chinese.
I don't want to get you into a political discussion, Gordon Chang, but I'm just curious what you make of what Ambassador O'Brien has said and also what President Trump is claiming there, that China will own the United States if Joe Biden becomes president.
First of all, I do believe that Beijing does not want President Trump to be elected. China watchers have views that span that Beijing favors Biden or Beijing favors Trump. But when you look at the propaganda that Beijing has been issuing, and you look at some of the things that they've been doing under the surface, under the table, they point to their desire to unseat President Trump. And that's because Trump was right when he said to Hugh Hewitt, his actions were causing problems for Beijing. I think China's in a world of hurt right now for a number of reasons, but one of them is that President Trump has exacerbated a number of their economic and other problems. So Trump's right on that. As for whether Beijing will own the United States if Biden will be elected, I don't think they'll own us, but I do think we're going to lose time. As I mentioned, Biden is going to try to develop a cooperative relationship with China. He not only believes China is benign, but that we should do this. What's going to happen in a Biden presidency is you'll have a year of weak and humiliating policies, like we saw during the Obama administration with regard to China. And Xi Jinping, though, is not going to reciprocate. He's going to, I think, double down and become even worse. And so even Biden will have to pivot and have Trump-like policies, but we will have lost a critical year. So I don't agree with President Trump when he says the Chinese will own us. The Chinese are driving the changes in the relationship, not the United States. And Biden will have to do what any American president will do. That's defend the United States. And if he doesn't do it, he'll be driven from office.
What policy tools, in your opinion, Gordon Chang, are in President Trump's toolbox that he hasn't used yet that he should use, or maybe that he has used that he should press a little more?
The number one thing that I would do if I were advising the president would be, I think President Trump should use his powers under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 to end all technical cooperation arrangements between U.S. companies and China. And specifically, the ones that come to mind would be Google's partnerships in China on artificial intelligence. These are fed, the products of this type of research is fed directly into the Chinese military. Google knows or should know that because Beijing has this policy, which is an announced policy, of civil military fusion. And so we should not be helping the Chinese build a military which is being configured to kill Americans. Also, Microsoft has partnership arrangements which would be targeted, but I would end those. That's the first thing that I would do. But in general, I think what the United States needs to do is to reduce drastically, even cut off trade and investment between the two countries for a number of reasons.
And that, of course, is where we would disagree, but we're running out of time. Although I will say this, I said this last time we had a conversation, Gordon, and I believe it's true now, is that letting up at this moment on the tariffs would send a poor message to the Chinese that we should not be sending at this point in time. So while I would not exacerbate that, I would at least agree that we shouldn't roll that back. But one more question I have on the policy tools at President Trump's disposal at this moment before we let you go, Gordon, and that is when it comes to sanctions and sanctioning different Chinese officials. I mean, they just decided, hey, we're going to go ahead and sanction 11 Americans to retaliate for you sanctioning, 11 Chinese officials. Is that something that President Trump should leverage more, maybe particularly against financial institutions? That's something you and I have talked about, especially vis-a-vis North Korea. What should we be seeing from the president as far as sanctions are concerned?
I think that what we should, in the immediate weeks, should be making sure that none of those 11 sanctioned individuals are maintaining ties with financial institutions that deal in US dollars. Because if they are, then we need to impose the steepest of fines or even cutting them off from their dollar accounts. Because we have to show Beijing that we're not afraid of them. And that's, I think, one of the major things that President Trump has done and deserves credit for. And that is saying to Beijing that they no longer have a veto over American foreign policy. Because in the George W. Bush and Obama administrations, Beijing was basically telling us what to do. And the response of Bush and Obama was, yes, sir. That was completely unacceptable. Of course, that's no longer the case. This is going to be a period of high tension, but it needs to be, because we've got to unwind some very unacceptable and some very disadvantageous American policies on China.
Always interesting insights from you, Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China, most recently, The Great U.S.-China Tech War with the Gatestone Institute, and also an aspiring Starfleet cadet. So if the officials at Starfleet Command are listening, you have someone who would be a perfect fit, particularly on your galactic political, because we don't have just geopolitical. It's got to be like with a galactic political, intergalactic, interpolitical, something like that studies or affairs. I think you'd be a great fit right there, especially for dealing with the Romulans.
Yeah, no, as I was going to say, after we deal with Chinese, it's on to the Borg and the Klingons.
Yeah, although you saw that Starfleet ultimately achieved peace with the Klingons, that while it did break up a couple of times, it was ratified again. They've been able to sort through things. I'm a little more concerned about the Romulans than the Klingons.
And the Borg.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the Borg are always deeply concerning. They're the ones that want to, they're like China. They want to assimilate everybody across the galaxy, right?
Right. Actually, that there's a lot of truth in that.
All right, Gordon G. Chang. We've known each other now 3 years. I've been interviewing you, and finally, we demonstrate now we have found our shared affinity for Star Trek. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care. Once again, Gordon Chang joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Kind of reminds me a little bit of that day we had the Star Wars discussion with Dave Rubin. He wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting. I was planning on bringing up Star Wars with Rubin. I wasn't expecting this with Gordon Chang. But, it doesn't surprise me, having gotten to know Gordon over the past few years, that he might be a Star Trek fan. But his insights, too, are very solid when it comes to the stakes of Taiwan and Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai, who is a noted media figure there, owns a couple of media outlets. His arrest, I think over the weekend, was deeply disturbing. The Uyghur Muslims, what they're doing, 3 million Muslims in concentration camps, literal concentration camps, not what the left describes as Trump concentration camps with regards to illegal immigrants, but actual concentration camps involving re-education camps. The list does go on with what China is doing. So we need to be smart about it. We do need to be tough on China. Where we get to the economics is where I think things get a little bit dicier, and you have to be a little more sensitive in that way. But it is important to take a tough stand, especially at this moment, and it does appear quite clear that Joe Biden would not take that level of a tough stand, especially in these crises and especially regarding coronavirus, as Donald Trump. Once again, my thanks to Gordon G. Chang for joining us here today on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Thanks for watching this clip of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't miss more engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe today to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel. You do not want to miss our live show. Thanks for your support.
I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.